Welcome to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement, a podcast where we dive into the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of the law enforcement officer.
Minor injury accident in the 2700 block of 156th Avenue Northeast.
All right, welcome back to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. I'm your host, Vernon Phillips, and today we've got Justin King with us, and I'm going to turn it over to Justin, just let him kind of explain who he is, give some of his background, his history in law enforcement, and what he's doing now. So, Justin, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Vernon. I really appreciate it. It's exciting anytime we get to visit with you, and I know your passion where it lies, and I think we kind of have a joint way that we see things about how we develop leaders and everything. And my background, like everybody, I've got a little bit of a story. I was in the Army and did that in my early 20s. And then I decided to go back to college, finish my degree, went back in the Army as an officer, and really loved my time in the Army. Army was transformational for me. It really helped me to grow up and learn a little bit, but I started to develop kind of a passion for leadership in that time. And when I decided to transition out of the Army, I joined the Drug Enforcement Administration and did 21 years with the Drug Enforcement Administration, just a little over. So I got about 30 years of federal time with the government between the Army and Department of Justice. But during my time with the DEA, I actually stayed in the National Guard for a few years and taught officer candidate school. So I continued to kind of grow that passion to develop leaders. And throughout my DEA career, I was able to do some pretty interesting things. I started off on the southwest border in Texas and expanded that. I went into the Foreign Deployed Advisory Support Team program, which was a program that we worked in conjunction with Department of Defense. Primarily what we did was go and embed with special operations forces in Afghanistan to work counterterrorism, counter-narcotics operations because of the connection and the nexus between the funding of the insurgency and the Taliban with drugs. And for that program, we had to have our own selection program. It was like our special operations for DEA, so we could actually work these ops. And what that did was give me the opportunity to not just work in Afghanistan, but work in multiple foreign countries with DEA. I did 4 tours in Afghanistan, 3 as an agent, 1 as a team leader, and ultimately would go back and run that program before they disbanded it when we started pulling out of Afghanistan. We actually had stopped running those tactical operations mostly around 2015-16, just because the military was doing more of an advisory role. We kept agents there, but we didn't deploy our teams back in the country. And from there, I went to the Office of Training for a year, continued on with that training theme, and finished up my last 2 assignments with the DEA. I was the assistant special agent in charge in Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, for 3 years, and then I finally finished out when I was the special agent in charge of the Omaha division. So I had 5 states, 11 offices. But when I got later in my career, I really had a few things that happened that changed me. And one of them was when I was in Arkansas, I went to the National Command and Staff College Command and Staff program. I went through that program. 6 weeks, or essentially 240 hours worth of online training and 2 weeks of in-person training. And that's where I met Dr. Javidi and some of the team at the college. And over the next few years, Dr. Javidi and I stayed in contact, and Mitch would come into Arkansas, do some trainings, and actually brought him into Omaha to help train my people, our staff. And we just kept in contact. And as I got closer to leaving the federal government, I was contacting him just about this time of year, actually. And we were talking about the future. And I said, I really want, my passion is to try to help people. How do we do that? How do we not just teach people leadership, but what he does and what the college does is we work very hard to help people understand the effects of leadership, the stress that comes with leadership, the time that it takes and the energy it takes. And Mitch was gracious enough to offer me a position, and I got to come on staff. So for the last almost 2 years, I've been with the college, and it's been a absolute blast and a lot of travel. I've done a lot of travel, a lot of teaching, but I've learned so much. It's just solidified my belief that we're in the right space. We're over target. We're touching people and we're helping people. And there's so much that we can offer, and we just are passionate about how do we go in and help develop the next generation. Maybe not even the younger people that we're talking about. Yes, we want to affect them, but some of our older senior leaders that are dealing with so much. And because I think that working and being a leader in law enforcement is one of the most challenging jobs there is in the world right now. I think it's a lot, and we just want people to be stronger and healthier. And so I think we have a great team of people that strives every day to deliver that.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I mean, I appreciate what you guys do at the college. Man, I mean, to try to go back through and you know and pick something from, your career, but there's a whole lot there that, we could spend time on and highlight and dive into. I mean, I'm sure you've got a lot of just things that we can pull out, but when you look back at your career and also where you're at now. I mean, obviously, like you said, we know that law enforcement is stressful. We know that it demands a lot of the individual that's working in that space. When you were working, actively working law enforcement, and then even now, still as you continue on working with law enforcement, how do you keep yourself at a balanced level? So how do you take care of your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being?
Yeah, so it's really a great question because it starts off and it really is the nucleus of what we are. And as a college and what we teach, and through Dr. Javidi's theory and his science of 11 rings, we go and we set on that what we call our compass, and we talk about our family, our relationships, our spiritual connection, and our social connection. We always bring people back to that. And what we see is that essentially, like, you get almost that fog inside your brain because you're making so many decisions and you're dealing with so much at work, that we see people that you go home, and we always say, be where your feet are. And so
Right.
when you get home and you're there, but you seem to spend all your energy that day doing what you've been doing, and then all of a sudden, you need to be present. And so as I go through and I look back at my career, there's times whenever I wasn't doing that well. And so I strive every day to do that. And I start off with, first off, my faith, and where I draw my strength, and where I looked to the Lord to guide me. And I've always done that. I've always asked for strength, courage, and wisdom in anything I do. And I feel like that keeps me grounded. And then my family, I've married a very strong woman who supported me through all of these deployments and things, and has been there, to walk with me, and then with my children and focus on that. I will be the first to admit it. There's many times I didn't get it right, but I
Mm.
try every day to do better. And what we teach in our college is a lot of that is, how do you get through that? How do you find that energy? And almost have to teach people to be a little bit selfish with their self and their time. How do we go back and really focus and take some time? And, we teach things like, reversal strategies for breathing, how to get in the right headspace. We want people to think like that, but we also want people to understand, if you're focusing on those things, if you're focusing on your spiritual being, your relationships, your family, and your connection to other people, and you do that, that's actually helping you be stronger. It's giving you that perspective. It's keeping you aligned with where you need to be. And one of the most common themes we see when we talk to people in law enforcement is, how many people are, when you ask them, hey, how many people like to mow their grass, for example? Everybody shoots their hand. A lot of people put their hand up, and you say, why? They say, I could just be alone. I want to be by
Mm.
myself. I put my AirPods in, I get on there, and we see that, and we say, that's actually not what we need to do. We don't want to isolate. We want to be with people. And we all go through it. So helping people understand that, I think, is awareness. And then the other thing is what I've learned over the last couple of years is, it's a process. When you come off of that, you're so used to running on that wheel, it seems like, making those decisions, putting out fires, that you actually become kind of immune to anything else at sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I appreciate all of that you shared. I mean, there's a lot of things that, we need to be focusing on, but what I liked is you said that I wasn't always good at it, right? Because I think that that is where a lot of us get to, where we need to be honest with ourselves, is like, hey, yes, we need to be investing in taking care of ourselves and being balanced. But we also need to understand that that's not always going to be the case each and every day, day in and day out. And I also like the fact that you definitely hit on your faith, which is a huge component, for myself as well. And I also think that that's one area right now in law enforcement that I feel like we're lacking. I feel like we do good and I share this all the time. I feel like we do good with the physical, the mental, the emotional, but I feel like the spiritual kind of aspect is taking that back seat. And from my own personal observation, looking into law enforcement and the first responder realm, is that people who have that faith, right? They are just more resilient individuals. They just better process the different things they go through, and whether that's a critical incident or whether that's just dealing with life in general. They just seem to have a better outlook, have a better perspective, and they just seem to handle things better. But it doesn't mean, like you shared, that you're always going to be on point. You're always going to be, hitting that mark 100% of the time. But the whole thing is that we strive each and every day to invest in ourselves. And like you said, that requires us sometimes to be selfish, right? To take time for ourselves, carve that out. And people who are in a role where you serve other people, it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to kind of say, okay, hey, time out. I need to dial it back. I need to start focusing on me. I need to really make sure that I'm where I need to be. Because if you are not at your peak performance, then you're not going to be able to operate at peak performance, right? The healthier you are as an individual, the healthier relationships you're going to have, the healthier way you're going to interact with the community, the healthier way you're going to interact with those who are underneath you. So that's why it's important that we have to continue to invest in ourselves. So, there's a lot of great points that you made, when you were talking about that.
Yeah, that investment in ourselves, I think, is something that we really understand it when we're young and then moving up in our career. We see a goal. Hey, I may want to promote someday. I may want to go to be a dog handler. I may want to, go to SWAT, or I may want to be in investigations. We see that and we understand making those sacrifices and moving toward that. But it's the compounding effects of stress and the job over time, it starts to erode some of the things. And unfortunately, what we see, and I'm speak from myself first, is the places that I could always come back and say, "Oh, I needed to do that.
Mm.
That was important." But then I would come home and I couldn't turn that off. I would be talking to my daughters like they were somebody I was questioning. That would be like, or I would try to fix something. Oh, it's not a fix. They just wanted dad to be dad.
Yeah.
And, why can't you just come in and give me a big hug, and just tell me you love me? And I would tell my daughters I loved them, but it wasn't like that. They felt it sometimes,
Yeah.
because they have that. And I realize over time, and as we go through this space and we talk about, what you're saying is that sacrifice. You're sacrificing something. And when you start to give those sacrifices up, or you start to sacrifice, well, what are you losing? Well, you start to lose those connections with your family. You can't get that time back. You're not sleeping well. You're not taking care of yourself. And when you're young, those small injuries or those things don't affect you as much. But as you get older, all those things build up. And I think that one of the things we've started to really do is to get people to understand, where is all their energy going?
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple. We'll have people open up their phone and just go to their battery and look on these new phones, they'll show you where all your battery power is going. And it's kind of like that. We want people to not have that burnout. We don't want people to not have that check engine light coming on them, doing that preventive maintenance and doing that and everything. Because what's the best part about all this, if you're actually doing it right, you'll have a lot more energy at work, you'll be a lot more focused, and you'll be a lot more productive. And we know in this profession, everybody's stretched thin.
Oh yeah.
Everybody is, we're promoting younger with less experienced people. So they're even more stressed. They don't have that experience. And so, it's unfortunate that it is what it is, but it is what it is. And you can't change that. Can only work through the process. And how do we grow? And when we see people who come to us, especially as a whole client, they come to us and they instant culture of let's take care of ourselves, let's grow, let's develop. We see that holistic approach in an agency, you really start to see that organizational culture grow.
Yeah. No, that's important. I mean, that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to be very, strategic in how we're dealing with stuff. I mean, especially for myself in my own life, but in all transparency, the last several weeks, like I've really just kind of felt it just in my own, in my own life, just kind of feeling that pull, right? Being stretched thin, kind of putting that up. If we're going to start talking about Dr. Davidi here, starting to put that elasticity to test, right? Kind of,
Yes.
you know, I went in for I go in every 3 months and do a checkup at the doctor, and they run my blood work every 3 months, and then they do an HRV and they do an in body, um, and I go in and I sit down. They're like, "What in the world is going on?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, HRV is, is terrible. They're like, your stress levels are like just through the roof. They're like, your energy's tanked. Like you're just like you are like on the verge of, like that burnout. And so for me, like, and I notice that, and I feel that back, at home, and and it kind of just really makes you stop and say, okay, like what's the you know what's the driving factor in this, and then what am I doing that's contributing to this, or what am I not doing that's not helping me, to kind of bring that down. And there's several things that I can look back on and say, okay, this and this. But we start talking about how we interact with our family,
Mhm.
and that's where I noticed it, right? And we talked about this, back in June when we were together, and I brought up the ballet shoes, but just the other day, same daughter, she comes over, and I'm just kind of just tapped out on edge, just like, all right, I'm overstimulated, I'm kind of done. She comes over, and she just wants to give me a hug, and part of you is like, I just like, I don't want, like, just I
Yeah.
don't want anybody to touch me right now. Just leave me alone. Kind of let me be. You, then you have to think, well, how does that translate
Mhm.
to her? Because her being 11, that doesn't compute to her that, okay, there's other things going on, just like my dad doesn't want me to hug him.
Yeah.
So those are the things that really like key in on me. And then just, I got the boys, and they're just full on all the time. They're 5 and 3, and they're just hard charging and just running, 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 running. And so I just noticed, I'm like, man, I just my frustration level or my irritability with them, like, is just really, really short. Just talking to my wife about it, I'm like, I gotta like make sure that I'm dialing this back and making sure that I'm, taking care of myself, because, that directly affects things at home. Right. And for me, that's the biggest support network, my wife and my family. And so if I am taking all of that home, and then they're getting what's left of me, they're not getting the best of me. And if I'm not investing in myself, I mean, then I am not giving my best to them, and that's not fair to them. So, yeah. So for me, the last several weeks, it's like I've just been like really trying to, like, tackle that, and really kind of tune that back in. And it's been, for whatever reason, this time it's been a little bit more difficult than normal. When we talk about, because I talk about dealing with your stress and making sure that we're, you have those ebbs and flows, right? You're gonna have times where you're just, man, you're striking on all cylinders, you're just bam, 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 and then there's times where you're just like, man, I am not running to full capacity. What's going on? What do I need to do? So, it's those times where we learn and we adapt, and, we just continue to move forward and put the time in, because eventually, right, we're gonna make our way back out of that, and we're gonna be kind of hitting. But the more we do that, the less, of the big ups and downs we have, right? Because there's going to be some of that variability, and you want a little bit of variability, but you want it to be where it's a nice, steady
Yeah.
back and forth like this, where if you're not investing in yourself, I mean, you're going to go from here and you're going to here. And it's just that just wears on you as individual.
Yeah. I think what you said a couple of things that really, really strike home to me. And what you're saying, man, I've been there. There's times when all of a sudden you're just like, why am I in this? Like, it's almost like I'm in this dark space. I'm not all of a sudden things caught up to me. And we see and when people start to get there and you feel I don't have that energy or whatever, and something's off or whatever. The first thing is, recognizing it. And you're like, I know something's not going right. And I think what's really important is us to look at that investment in other people. At work, we do that every day. You wouldn't
Yeah.
have somebody come up and say, "Hey, boss, I need to talk to you," and everything where you're like, "Oh, I just don't want to," you wouldn't do that. But when we get home, why is that? We become more vulnerable. We expose ourselves. We're out. And we talk about that elasticity. How do we bend, not break? We don't want to be like that oak tree that breaks. We want to be like bamboo, bend, and we can come back. And we want that to grow. And as what we teach, and through Dr. Javidi, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about him, but going back to our late 80s, early 90s and developing this left of bang training where we make more resilient people through, you know, understanding how to balance ourselves, how to regulate. And, one of the things that you said about the hug, actually, that's what you needed right then. You didn't
Yeah.
feel it, but you needed it because you needed that connection back because that's a centering and it
Oh
brings us
yeah.
back. And we see that a lot. We see it with people. And, you'll get the guys that are like older like me, and they'll be sitting in class like this, and they're sitting there and everything. And I don't need that, or I don't think that that's important. Or you talk about how many people sleep good at night. Most people, what we get on this isn't scientific, but when I see a show of hands, it's 4 to 5 hours is the average what people admit to. And then we don't know, but then but at some points in our life, we were striving, we were moving, we had the energy, but we may not have had all those commitments. And I can remember a battalion commander I worked for who was phenomenal when I was in the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell. And he would always talk about family and taking care of our family. But as a young lieutenant, I was just go, 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 go,
Yeah.
right? And I think back, there were many people told me these things. They told me, but what we see is so many of us wait till we're like in our 50s to get it kind of figured out, but we should have been doing it earlier. And you and I are having this conversation, and it's a phenomenal conversation. But what unfortunately we see is we should be pushing this at the academy level. We should be teaching this. We should be implementing it. And just what you guys are doing is it's that constant making it a priority, and no different than going out and being qualified. All your training, what are we doing to take care of ourselves? Because the reality of it is not only do we see a lot of fractured relationships in this profession, we see a lot of people who don't have a long lifespan after they retire.
Yeah.
Stress is real. Stress takes energy. It takes from our day to day, and it really does. You need stress at some points, but too much is bad. And we also start to see over time people get, rigid. They just get rigid, and they don't want that. And then we start to see some bad things happen, unfortunately. But it's why we're passionate, if we can help people understand that. And everything we do at the National Command Staff College and our parent company, Magnus One, is, it's about performance. And we say, if you're going to be a performer, if you're going to be a high performer, you've got to take care of you. You've got to take care. You would never see a professional athlete or a sports team who didn't say that they needed to be rested, recovered before the game, right? They need to be in the right headspace. You'd never see that. There's so much work goes into that. We're missing the mark in this profession because we're overwhelmed, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's across all the levels. It's not just, the line level, deputy or officer that's working. I mean, it goes all the way through, up to the ranks. And, I think that taking that time and saying, okay, hey, what are we doing? Like, how are we investing in our people? How are we really making sure that they are, the best version of themselves? And so taking that initiative and being forward thinking and investing in them on the forefront, right, just gives them the opportunity to be better individuals themselves. Right. So if we're offering different things and we're offering different ways for them to manage stress or learn about finances or learn about just mindfulness or just talking about elasticity of being more pliable as an individual, that just makes them a better employee. And
Mhm.
if we're honest, who doesn't want a better employee?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, who doesn't want a better boss,
Yeah.
right? What's a good boss? And through going through and teaching people that it all works together, and we all have areas in our life that are stronger than others, and we have things that
Yep.
we need to work on. And we are very good at, like you said earlier, after something happens, coming in and taking care of this profession. But how can we prevent that? How can we grow those people? And ultimately, I think we have to think about this in a couple of different ways. Is we have to say, we're all going to time out in whatever job we're in. That organization, that agency is going to be there after we're gone.
Yep.
So we're always trying to leave it better than we found it. But are we leaving healthier, stronger people? And so, that can take this to the next level, because the next few years are probably going to be just as challenging as the last few years. It's not always going to be easy, but it's always hard to implement things whenever you're working every day. And you can't just stop there what we're doing in this profession and say, everybody go over here for 3 weeks of training. We're just going to stop. So we're always having to do that. And how we implement that is a challenge, because in our profession, it's shifts. You have different groups of people coming at different times. And we've all seen those people that you say, how many people like nights? And you'll have people raise their hand. They're all about it, right? Some people don't want to be on different, they get used to that. And so when we deliver that, one of the things that we've really tried to do over the last few years is implement a more reinforced positivity training on the backside, through using our Magnus Leader app. that we have those things. So if somebody has that heavy day, they come in and they say, "Okay, I need some help right now. I need to go in and what's some strategies? I can do some breathing, some tension release. I can get myself back focused before I walk in my door." Where you're not like me, who someday, I would come back from Afghanistan, 2 days before I'm in Afghanistan, I'm sitting at my kid's ball game. And more than once, my wife's like, "You probably just need to go back to Afghanistan because that guy who came home is still over there. Your
Yeah.
brain is still there." And so I wasn't being present and everything. And then where I got frustrated was I was with a whole bunch of like-minded people. I'm over there, everybody, "Oh, Justin's great. He's part of the team. We're doing all this great stuff." But then I would come home. My family is not,
Yeah.
they're not in law enforcement. They're not doing that. They don't understand. They're like, "Whatever you did, I don't care. You're home, be dad." But I wanted to come home and go mow the grass.
Yeah.
I wanted to go build a table in the wood shop. I didn't want to say that, not that I didn't love them. I wasn't connecting with them anymore. And how we do that. So what we've done in all of our trainings, as you've seen, but I think it's important, is we have that post training in person development that we want to continue to connect to people and get people in a routine of self growth, self care. We're not talking wellness, well being so much, but we are hitting on that
Yeah.
because we want people to understand who you are is so important and we need you to be there for the long haul, both at work and at home.
Yep. No, absolutely. And, as we kind of start looking at, law enforcement, the first responder kind of realm as a whole, what do you feel right now that we're doing well at? And then on the flip side of that, what do you feel like we're not doing well at?
Well, as one thing coming from the federal government, I have to start off by saying I did not know as much about local, state level law enforcement and I've learned a lot over a couple of years. I still have a lot to learn, but I didn't realize just how vast the number of law enforcement people are
Mm,
out there and first responders across the board. And so what I do think is there is an awareness, more of an awareness right now that we need to be taking care of people. Recruiting and retention, of course, are huge, but it's like that retention. And I think that what we're starting to understand more and more is we're not doing a good enough job of training people before they go into positions. Once they go through basic training and they get in there in their first years, but especially leaders, we're not giving them that leadership development. And so what we see is more people are becoming aware of that, but a lot of people just don't know where to start. And so how they do it, and then the investment, not just what it costs to invest in somebody, but the time when they lose them from their agency to be trained. So I think having that awareness is something important. Where I think that we need to grow and develop is understand that if we look early on in somebody's career and we say, okay, that person, we need to see them not just where they're at now, but where they're going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road. And we start to say, okay, this is the future. As I said, we're all time out. And I like movies. One of my favorite movies of all time is the first Rocky movie. And there's a famous scene in that movie. If you ever watch it again, some people will glaze over it. But there's a time whenever Rocky is going to have this fight, he goes to Mickey and asks him to train him. And Mickey says no, because Mickey just says he's a bum, right?
mm,
Well, Mickey sees on the TV later where Apollo Creed is talking about fighting this fight and he gets mad and he goes to Rocky and says, "I'll train you." And Rocky's like, "Where were you 10 years ago? Where were you when I needed you?" And he has this kind of meltdown on him. He's like, "You didn't." And so it's like we got what we got, right? We had to see
yeah.
that development. And I think that we're seeing more of that, but I think we have a profession that has had been very reactionary to some things over the last few years that has taken away from that maybe progress we had, and we're having to jumpstart that now and kickstart it. And ultimately, we have to push many things at the profession to help grow that. We have to develop leaders, of course, but we have to make well-rounded, healthy people and keep them well-rounded and healthy and invest in them. It's almost like we have to look at it almost like how they do aircraft maintenance. Aircraft maintenance is the standard that is set so high. What is our maintenance on our people? How are we taking care of them and helping them grow and giving them the tools? And I think that's one of the things that we're passionate about is that giving the tools in person, online, but then reinforcing it afterward. But it's got to be cultural. It's got to be cultural for an agency, I think.
Yeah. And I think you're right because, and it's also you have to have that buy in. um, from all levels, and you're going to have individuals that are just, they're not going to be into it. They're not going to be sold on it. Like you said, the the old crusty guys with their arms crossed in the back, like, why do I need this? I haven't had this the last, 20 years of my career. What good is this going to do me now? But more often than not, if you can break through to that group, right? Most of them will be like, man, why were we not teaching this, you know,
Yeah.
20 years ago? Why were we not, talking about this stuff, when people were coming in? And you see that often with those
Yeah.
individuals where they start talking like that. But getting that buy-in, getting people to really see it. A lot of it isn't until they actually do it, or they actually, try to implement some type of self-regulation method. To then
Mhm.
when then they're like, man, so this stuff does work,
Yeah.
right?
It's funny because I can remember sometimes whenever early on I was like, "Oh, you want me to work focus?" When Doc Javidi, he was like, "Okay, we're gonna do some box breathing," and I'm like, "Oh, what's this?" Right? And you go through that and you're like, that makes me feel better. I start doing this, a little routine, focusing on myself. And I think that what we see also is, a lot big part of leadership or anything is communications and relationships, developing relationships with people. And if people see that and they see that buy-in at the top and they see that development, and hey, how are you doing? And okay, every you go around as a boss, you say that, everybody's like, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. But it's like, you look at somebody, you get to know them, you're like, yeah, they're not good. And a boss would have no problem telling somebody to go take a couple of days. They need to help take care of themselves. But a lot of times the boss is the one that'll never, ever tell themselves to take some time.
Yeah.
And I was that person, I mean, I would do that. And so as I go around, one thing that this last couple of year journey has revealed to me is how many mistakes I made. I will say that one thing I am extremely grateful for and proud of, I think we talked about this when we were in Florida, was when I went through that command and staff leadership program in 2018. It absolutely transformed the way I led. I was more of a transactional leader, I think, up until that point, and I started to become a transformational leader. I really started to focus on people. I started to focus on those relationships and developing them and trying to create processes and systems that would be there after I left and helping people, but even having conversations with people about, hey, where do you want to be 5 years from now? What are you trying to accomplish? More conversations about families and things outside of work than at work. And I'm not going to say I always did it right, but I think I did a lot better, and I'm grateful for that program. It changed the way I led for the last 6 years of my career.
Yeah, and I think that's important, is getting people to that place, right, where they the whole way in which they view themselves and the way that they view their career, whatever that path is, whatever they decide to, whether they're in leadership or not. And we talked about that when I was with you guys in June about leadership, and it's like, well, how long have you been in leadership? Well, at some point or another, you're a leader, right? Whether you're on the line level or you're the chief or the sheriff, you're a leader, and you're a leader to somebody. So making sure that you're investing in yourself and actually learning that, and then having that transform who you are, and the day to day, what you do, how you interact with people, how you treat people, how you treat yourself. I think that's one of the biggest things, is because you know sometimes the way we treat ourselves, we wouldn't even treat our enemies sometimes the way we treat ourselves, right? The
Yeah.
way that we talk to ourselves. And and my wife called me on that the other day. She just because, like I said, full transparency, I've just been really, really stressed out lately for whatever reason. She's like, what, like, why? I said, I don't know. Like, I
Mhm.
can't pinpoint it. It's just, I think it's just everything is starting to really, come together. And I was sitting there and I was talking to myself, and she's like, what are you saying? I'm like, nothing. I'm fine. She's like, you're not fine. She's like, you're talking ugly to yourself. And I'm like, I'm okay. She's like, you're not okay. She's like, why are you talking so ugly to yourself? And I think there's a lot of people that probably get into that space more often than they really want to acknowledge, but they are not willing to actually say it and be honest with themselves. Like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes I am, my own worst critic, and something that, Dr. Kathy Greenberg always says is, be on your side, not on your case.
Yeah.
And, so sometimes we have to remember that, like, hey, okay, it's okay sometimes to give yourself some grace. yes, there are some times where you have to kind of, tighten yourself up and say, okay, all right, you can do better, you can make better decisions, you can act better, right? But then there are other times where you can give yourself a little grace and say, okay, here's a little space. What are we going to do now moving forward? So,
What Kathy and Mitch, they're brilliantly smart people, right? And they literally have write books. They have written books on these things. And one of the things that they bring up a lot is, like where you went with that, because do you have give yourself some grace, right? Give yourself some credit for what you do. In this profession, we see so many people that, because we're servants, we want to serve people. And because of that, we have that, what Dr. Javid calls that unconditional love, right? For the communities we serve. And because that sacrifice comes in and we want to do it right. The thing is nothing's ever perfect. And so we look so much, and one of the things we teach a lot, especially to leaders, is to compliment the effort, not the outcome. Is to look at the effort that was put in. And we've all been there at our kids' ball game or something where they're trying hard, but they strike out. And we're like, hey, you'll get them next time and everything. But we don't ever tell ourselves that. I mean,
yeah.
we're always like
Yep.
looking at that, and it could be just compounding things like when you and I get into those places, and I'm guilty of it too, is okay, I know I'm here, I'm going into this, and it can be a combination of things. You got cut off on the way to work, and you're running late, you spill your coffee or whatever, or you got air conditioner you got to fix at home, it's going to cost a bunch of money, and things add up. And we have to understand that. And what we'll do, unfortunately, is we'll go to work and we'll act like none of that's happening. But when we come home, it's all just that
Yeah.
cortisol and everything is sitting in that brain, and we got to find a way to flush it out. We've got to find a way to do that. And we can only do that by going in and creating some reversal on that. And through, reversal strategies that we teach at Dr. Javidi and people developed years ago, and he's just grown this through the years, is really that ability to do it. Because when you get to that place, how do I make myself get out of it? And sometimes it's not as easy as we think, but we've got to find a way to move through it. And we feel like that we have a very good framework for how to do that. And we go around, but developing people, just it's as simple as that. That's why when people will come like to our 2-day workshop, people will come out and they'll be like, it's unlike any leadership I've ever had, because it was a lot about me, but understanding me. Because we tell people all the time, we're not going to have every leadership strategy that's going to work for everybody, but can we help you be present? Can we help you have the energy? Can we actually help you communicate effectively, to hear people, not just talk? Can we help you with your understand that if your finances aren't doing well, or why are you not occupationally fulfilled anymore? You say you got into this profession, you love it and everything. Well, what's changed? Well, you see some pretty tough things. You see people at their maddest, saddest, baddest, as our friend Brian Ellis always says. We see people at those, and we take that home. And some of these things we can't unsee, we can't unhear, we can't unsmell, but we have to understand we have to take care of ourselves.
Yep. So kind of focusing on that point there about taking care of ourselves, what would you say to those that are just coming into the profession? Like what is a piece of advice that you'd give them? Obviously, you've got a lot you can draw from your career in law enforcement, also the military, but what is one piece of advice you would give to them? But then also on the back end of that, what is one piece of advice that you'd give to those who are getting ready to retire and exit the career?
So the one piece of advice I would give to anyone coming into the profession is to be a sponge, to learn. And you're going to learn so much, but you're not going to learn it all at once. And that wisdom and that growth never stops. You have to have experiences to do that. And you have to also understand that it's a process. Those opportunities will happen. Certain things will reveal themselves, but don't be so quick to get to the finish line that you forget to enjoy the race, right? And on the backside of that, whenever I'm talking to people who are getting close to retiring and everything, is be proud of what you've done and understand that you still have a lot of value. You still have a lot to give back, and you are mentoring and nurturing the next generation. Everything you do is affecting them, but also make sure that you're planning to understand that what we teach is what Dr. Javidi, the new book that he wrote was this elastic identity. is that identity has to be, this job can't be your only identity so much that you identify with it, that when this job's gone, you don't know who you are anymore.
Mm.
And if you're not who you should be right now, if you're so embedded in that, you've got to start peeling that back, because the day you walk out of your agency, a lot of those phone calls, people won't answer the phone sometimes. You're not in that position anymore. So don't be so connected to that position. I think Colin Powell said that, don't be so connected to your position that when it goes away, you don't know what to do or who you are
Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah.
So have that identity. You're still a father. You're a sibling. You're a spouse. You're maybe a grandparent by the time you get my age. You hear I got a grandson in here. It's about a year and a half. He's screamed a couple of times. Understand who you are, but at some point in your career, you have to realize, people always said you'll know when you know. And I did. I didn't regret. I wasn't fighting it. I wasn't like counting the days, but I knew that I was time to turn the page and do something else. And the last thing I'd say to that is, there's a whole lot you can still do after you retire and go into another area. And I think you start to see that giving back really becomes a big thing, is how do I do that and help people at all levels? And honestly, when you're doing that, it gives you a purpose, a new purpose.
Yeah. No, and that's great advice for, whether they're just coming in or somebody getting ready to retire. Just some really good sound things. And as we kind of get close to here wrapping up, the last thing I want to ask you, and you've already kind of hit on it earlier in the conversation, but as you look back over your career and to where you're at now, how much has your faith played a factor into where you're at today and who you are and how it shaped you?
It's been everything. When I was a young captain and I was down at Fort Benning going through training, my youngest daughter was just about to be born. So we're talking, 26 years ago or so. I was a Christian, I was a believer, but wasn't walking with the Lord the way I felt I should have been. I rededicated my life to Christ. I'm not going to say I'm an imperfect person, but all my wisdom, everything I do, all the decisions we've ever made, we've gone to the Lord to guide us on those. I was told whenever I went to the FAST program that it was a bad decision for my career, but I felt like I was drawn to do that. And just like when I went back years later, people were like, it's not a good thing to do. But what I always said is, my strength comes from the Lord, and He's working on me still. And what I know as a believer is that, as a Christian, you have hope. You have hope. You have a promise for tomorrow. And we're only on this earth for a certain amount of time. And I do feel like God puts us on this earth to do a job and to further His kingdom. And we need to demonstrate that. And, if you say, God says first and foremost to love Him and then love your neighbor. And we're supposed to do that. And so as a Christian, I'm still a selfish person. I still don't do things right all the time, but I'm trying to make the world a better place. And through my example, I hope to lead people to be faithful as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important factor is having that faith in your life, right? Is believing in, Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior and having that, that hope and that encouragement that it gives us, but also that peace, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that life's going to be easy because you and I both know it's not. It's got its challenges and its struggles and its trials, but that's what gives us the ability to face those and to kind of push headlong into that because we know that at the end of the day that we may lose this battle, but we know that the war has already been won, and that gives
Yes.
us that reassurance, that gives us that hope that we have, and I couldn't think of a better way to end our conversation than on that note.
Well, thank you for that. I do believe that, I said this, working in this profession is a blessing. I mean, it's a hard job. It's stressful, but you work with some of the most incredible, amazing people,
Hmm.
and you meet some of the most unbelievable friends. This career took me all over the world, and my hope was by the time I left any place that people said that there was at least something about me that they saw and they understood that it was because of my faith. And I would hope that people would know that. And if I haven't displayed that, then I don't feel like I led the way I should have. And so I thank you for that opportunity. And it's always fun to speak, and I could speak for hours on leadership and things, but ultimately I will say that that servant leadership and that growth and everything is, like you said, it's not always perfect, but
Yeah.
it is a blessing to do it.
Yep. Well, Justin, if somebody wants to reach out to you or the college, what's the best way for them to be able to do that?
Yeah, the best way is to go to commandcollege.org, and that is our website, or they can go to Magnus One Leadership as well. And then people can always just reach out to me directly. My number 501-548-1484, or my email is justin.king@commandcollege.org. And so we just say encourage people. We love to talk about leadership and personal performance. And if people are interested in that, we'll be happy to see if we can walk with them or point them in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I'll add all that in the show notes so that information will be in there. But Justin, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight and just all those little nuggets that you shared.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, Vern. And anytime we can be of help, we will be there. And thank you for everything.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
I appreciate you tuning in and listening to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and share this resource with your fellow officers. The goal of Critical Aspects is to serve, support, and sustain the law enforcement professionals. So head over to www.criticalaspects.org for more resources and information. And as always, God bless and be safe.